It's kind of unreasonable to expect video game developers to knock it out of the park every single time, especially with franchises releasing annually or close to it, and yet, sometimes there's just a single dud game that manages to stand out amongst all the rest. And with that in mind, I'm Josh from WhatCulture.com, and these are 10 video game franchises with one game everyone hates. Number 10, HITMAN Absolution. The Hitman franchise has maintained an impressive consistency for more than 20 years, albeit with one glaring exception, that being 2012's Hitman Absolution. Though Absolution certainly looked the part, it also saw developer IO Interactive severely water down the series' popular action stealth formula, presumably in an attempt to make it more appealing to a broader audience and rake in some extra cash. Now, I personally do have a soft spot for Absolution, yet even I concede that almost every change made was for the worse. From its more linear levels to its frustrating disguise system, divisive instinct mechanic, and risible mess of a story. The 6-year wait after fan-favourite entry Hitman Blood Money certainly did Absolution no favours at all either, and for it to then feel like a supremely dumbed-down experience ensured that it became the de facto franchise black sheep. And Absolution isn't a bad stealth game per se, but it is a bad Hitman game. And even the mechanical clunkiness of the 2000 original far outpaces what this cynical sequel had to offer. Number 9, Metroid Prime Federation Force. Much as there are many who have little love for Metroid Other M, that game does at least have its defenders, and even its staunch haters can surely appreciate the potential of a third-person Metroid game starring Samus. Yet it cannot be understated just how pissed off Metroid fans were when Nintendo finally announced the first new game in the series in 6 years since Other M in 2015, only for it to be Federation Force. Metroid Prime Federation Force was a co-op spin-off which fans collectively and rightly dogpiled for deviating from the series' much-loved formula, paring down the expected exploration elements, being too multiplayer-focused, having an excessively cartoonish art style, and most criminally, lacking Samus herself as a playable character. It just wasn't what fans wanted after so many years of waiting for a new Metroid, ensuring that it was dead on arrival sales-wise. Number 8, Dead Space 3. Example of publisher meddling completely killing a series dead, then look no further than Dead Space 3. After delivering one of the finest survival horror games with Dead Space 1 and one of the best action horror games with Dead Space 2, EA decided that the third game needed to attract a far bigger, more mainstream audience, publicly saying that the sequel needed to sell 5 million copies to be deemed a success. And according to a great deep dive into development from Eurogamer, this meant that a lot of the intriguing horror ideas the team had for the title had to be cut. In their place was co-op that felt incredibly crowbarred in, with the second character barely even featuring in the cutscenes, a larger focus on action, the game even opens with you shooting humans rather than monsters, and EA's early attempt at in-game microtransactions. Consequently, while Dead Space 3 is still an okay action game, it's rightfully hated for killing the potential of what should have been an excellent trilogy capper. Even worse, developers' Visceral Games shut down a few years later, which was a kick in the teeth across the board. Number 7, SIMCITY 2013. SimCity is one of the most impressively consistent video game franchises of all time, or at least it was, until 2013's much-anticipated reboot fell totally flat on its face. Given developer Maxis' rock-solid track record with the series, there was every pre-release reason to believe that they'd deliver on the promise of fully 3D visuals, a whole new game engine, and online multiplayer functionality. But then it came out, and to call SimCity's launch a disaster is an embarrassment to disasters. EA's requirement that players remain connected to the internet while playing, even in single player, caused massive headaches upon release, with network outages preventing players from using the game that they'd paid hard-earned money to play, while save data was also lost for some. Even EA themselves later called SimCity's launch dumb, yet took an entire year to remove the always online requirement. The near-universal disdain from fans led to the game flopping commercially, effectively killing the series dead, which is surely the saddest outcome from the whole debacle. And it's probably no surprise to learn that this dropped the same year that Dead Space 3 did, so yeah, you can imagine EA was not having a good 2013. Number 6, Devil May Cry 2. Once again, the Devil May Cry franchise has been impressively even across its 6 main titles, with one glaring exception. On paper, Devil May Cry 2 had the easy potential to build on the solid foundations of its predecessor and deliver a bigger, more badass sequel. Yet the fanbase was left with their jaws on the floor when DMC2 hit stores, given that Capcom severely simplified the original skill-based combat, in turn massively nerfing the sequel's difficulty. Beyond being hilariously easy though, I mean, you can literally just shoot your way through the game. Dante's personality was also changed to be more stoic, environments were more sparse and less detailed than before, the boss battles required less strategic finesse, and even the addition of a second playable character just felt like a lazy attempt to pad the game's playtime. As such, it came as little surprise that DMC2 was the result of a brutally troubled development, including a change of director mid-production. Thankfully, Capcom returned to the franchise with the fantastic Devil May Cry 3 2 years later, in turn repairing the series' wobbly rep. Number 5. Silent Hill: Book of Memories. While there are certainly a number of divisive entries into the Silent Hill franchise, Lord knows, there's only one really which most everyone can't stand, and that's the PS Vita exclusive Silent Hill: Book of Memories. For starters, did anyone in their right mind ever want a dungeon crawler spin-off to hit the survival horror series? And even if you were willing to accept that this is basically a Diablo-like wearing a grimy Silent Hill skin suit, it's not even a good one at that. From the clunky controls to the mediocre visuals, generic gameplay, and utter lack of Silent Hill's signature atmosphere, this is a failure in every way that it could be. A baffling attempt to diversify the franchise which was loudly rejected by the fanbase. The best thing that can be said about it is that it's playable, but when the rest of the series is just right there, why would you put yourself through it? And to make matters worse, this was the final taste of Silent Hill that fans had before Konami hibernated the franchise for an entire decade, which only makes it that much more exasperating. Number 4. Saints Row 2022. The Saints Row franchise has been so many things over the years that it's a surprise it took so long before its first major misstep. Whether it's the more grounded, but certainly still silly, original 2 games or the super-powered spin-offs, the open world series retained its fans the madder it got. Which, perhaps unsurprisingly, made the announcement that the series was being rebooted with all new characters a tough pill to swallow. Sadly, the final product didn't do much to convince people that the change was worthwhile, as 2022's Saints Row reboot was an aggressively unfunny and mediocre sandbox game. A far cry from the reinvigoration of the series that it was billed as, the title was slated by fans and critics alike, not to mention because it released in an incredibly buggy state even outside of the bog standard gameplay. As such, this new take has been universally rejected as a pale imitation of former glories. Number 3. Fallout: Brotherhood of Steel. Now, Fallout 76 may have been bad upon launch, but at least there's a contingent of players out there who are now having a genuinely good time with it. The same can't really be said for the franchise's first foray onto consoles though, that being Fallout: Brotherhood of Steel. A depressing swan song for the series' original developer, Interplay Entertainment, this spin-off took a sharp left turn away from what players expected of Fallout, opting for a stripped-down, ultra-linear take on the action RPG formula that these games were known for. Even with Interplay using the Snowblind engine, which previously wrought solid success on Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance, this is a yawn-inducingly threadbare offering defined by tedious combat, repetitive enemies, drab environments, and painfully boring quests. Desperate cynicism just drops from every pore of this thing, resulting in it flopping at retail at the time and putting the series on ice until 2008, when Fallout 3 brought it back bigger and better than ever. Number 2. Gears of War Judgment. After the original Gears of War trilogy was released, Epic Games began developing a prequel spin-off centered around a younger Damon Baird, which precisely zero fans asked for at the time, at least not done like this. As a result, Judgment is often jokingly referred to as the straight-to-video Gears of War game, an entry that feels less than in just about every way. From its more linear, arcade-style campaign to its simplified controls, forgettable story, and disappointingly bland multiplayer suite. It was dead obvious that Epic commissioned Bulletstorm developer People Can Fly to churn this one out with less time and money than a mainline Gears game, resulting in a title that felt like an assembly of the trilogy's cut-offs put into a blender and then served up as generic slop. Were this sold as the DLC that, let's face it, it basically was, fans would have likely been much kinder to it, but instead it came off as a craven cash grab that evaporated from the collective consciousness in record time. Number 1. SOCOM 4 US Navy SEALs. For an entire generation of PS2 owners, the SOCOM series was their gateway drug into online multiplayer on consoles, with the first 2 entries into the series boasting immensely addictive SEALs vs terrorists multiplayer shooter action. While many of the following sequels and spin-offs were polarizing though, it wasn't until SOCOM 4 that the wheels well and truly came off the Enterprise. In the titles leading up to this release, it became increasingly clear that developer Zipper Interactive was chasing the glory of the Call of Duty franchise, resulting in the more contained, straightforward multiplayer sorties being expanded into larger affairs, albeit with more arcadey, fast-paced gameplay than most fans wanted. It also didn't help at all that SOCOM 4 released a day before the 2011 PSN network outage, which ended up lasting over 3 weeks and effectively left players holding a disc that they just couldn't use. Well, unless they wanted to try their hand at the atrocious single-player campaign that was. Even fans able to look past the network issues were left with a game that didn't really feel like SOCOM at all, causing it to flop badly enough to kill the series outright. So that's our list. I want to know what you guys think down in the comments below. Did you play any of these games? And are there any other franchises you know with one bad game that it just can't shake? Let me know, and while you're down there, if you can, please give us a like, share, subscribe, and head over to WhatCulture.com for more lists and news like this every single day. Even if you don't though, I've been Josh, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you soon.